Good evening, everyone. Zoom is taking its sweet time to let everyone in, so we will give everyone a minute. We are working on chat today, and we are going to talk a little bit more about dates. We are both going to come up with a fix and then delete all of that code and use a date formatter library instead. Looks like we've got everyone. So let's kick it off. What did we do yesterday? Oh, Jason, do you have any announcements or anything to throw in? You are muted, but I'm assuming that's a no.
No announcements. I was just saying hey and listening in for a little bit.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Yes, Alina, message with mom chat. So what did we get done yesterday? I know we didn't do a specific to-do list or a punch list. But yep, we got HTML, we got our script set up, we started doing functions. What did we cover of CRUD? Do we remember? So we probably got the read done, right? Because we've got our update HTML working. And we also have the create done because we've got it storing in our JavaScript data array. So I use CRUD as a kind of a place marker when I leave off things at work. So I'll go, okay, what did I get done of this? And I'm like, I was working on this feature. I can't remember how much of the feature I got done. So that's where I'll leave my note of, hey, create and read are working, but update and delete aren't. And that's kind of just a good generic placeholder to just know, okay, this is how much I've got done, because almost every feature requires create, read, update, and delete. So sometimes the order you implement them are a little different, but it's a good general rule to follow. Alina also threw out time format. Yep, we started working with the date object in JavaScript. You will learn that that is both your friend and your nemesis. It is great for grabbing a timestamp and having support for time zones built in. And almost all browsers natively support that date object. So super easy to say new date and just grab that time. Less easy when you're working with it and doing any kind of time math. But we will actually start there this evening of going through the time format, catching the issue that I believe Kyle found around AM, PM, and right at noon. So we will solve for that. And then I am going to show you something called International Date Time Format, which is built into JavaScript, just to show you an option of working with a library to get the date and times that you want out. And then after class tonight, I will post 3 additional time libraries that I have either used or currently am using at work. I am not going to show those as code examples tonight because they are all opinionated. So I'm not going to go too deep into all their different options and how to use them all. But if you are using time in your code, which at some point in your code careers, you definitely will be doing, those libraries are a good thing to look into. What else did we do yesterday? Is there any light bulb moment that jumped out at you, something that clicked that you weren't getting before? Anything, something to share that you guys were proud of that you got working?
Just getting a better understanding of how the 3 files connect.
Awesome.
This stuff does not exist in isolation, and you can learn it in isolation, but you don't learn it till you do like we've been doing, and it starts to,
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think
yeah.
that a good example of that is we did the to-do app, and the to-do app all looked good, but we had like no CSS because we relied on our Bootstrap. So the chat app is a good example of, hey, we can still use our Bootstrap and we're still using our grid and we're still, but hey, we may just need to say that message pane, just shove it up. And so we've got our message at the top and our input down at the bottom. So I like the message app because it starts layering in the CSS, right? And gives you another layer of complexity. And so I think that this is one of those examples of like, we threw a lot at you in 2 weeks, and then we pump the brakes a little bit and go, all right, let's use this in practice. Let's do the to-do app, and then we do it all over again, right? So I'm hoping to actually be done tonight with the chat app, not only so we can kind of back burner that app and come back to that code in a couple weeks when I come back in either June or July and go, hey, remember that app? Let's redo that in React. And oh, by the way, now that we have it in React, let's layer in the backend and actually make that work on a server. So that's long-term looking, but we've got some features that we want to cover tomorrow. So the goal tonight is to get the chat app all finished up, to get all of our CRUD operations working. We're going to talk a little bit about hover states and getting edit and delete buttons to show up, but only when we want them to. And then we are going to hopefully wrap up anything in the chat app. Dominique, super glad to hear that you got good feedback from Karen with nesting objects. A reminder, if you guys have any questions, not only about what I'm working on in class, but if you've got questions about an old homework assignment, door is open on Slack. Feel free to shoot any questions over to me or to Karen, and we are happy to help you outside of class as well. And definitely talking out code with someone helps. I can't tell you how many times my boss has not written code in at least 10 years, if not closer to 20. And there are times that I go rubber duck with him and just talk things, and he goes, and there I go, that's it, genius, thank you. And he's like, I didn't tell you anything, but happy to lend an ear. So definitely talk out the code. Rely on each other for a study session, even if it's a virtual study session. And definitely reach out to TAs and mentors. I believe I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 one-on-one scheduled within the next week. So great. Thank you guys for reaching out, and hopefully I will be helpful in those sessions. But if you've got questions about contacting a mentor, or can someone else be a mentor or anything like that, definitely reach out to me or Dana or Jesse or Jason, whoever you are comfortable reaching out to, definitely do that. And yes, I talk to myself all day long. What I would like to know is how my dog knows that I am talking to myself and not just talking to my monitor, because she's chewing her bone right now. And I swear to God, I've been talking to myself all day today, and yet somehow she knows I am teaching. Sometimes that dog's a little too smart for my own good. All right. Let me open up the floor now to any questions that you want to ask in front of the class. Anything that we covered yesterday other than the AM PM thing, which we will cover in a moment. Questions short term, long term, what we did yesterday, what we did last week. Any questions about the upcoming curriculum? I can tell you winning lottery numbers, but it's on a 24-hour delay. Sorry.
I had a question about upcoming things. We're going to cover security in this course, right?
Correct.
I've seen some stories about the downgrade in cybersecurity with so many people working from home that there was a lot more vulnerability than when people are in an office.
Absolutely, yeah. So the big news that is affecting affecting the area that I am in right now. I'm down in North Carolina, and that pipeline that carried gas from Texas all the way up to New Jersey and all the states in between. There was a ransomware attack, right? So basically, these hackers got into the system, shut it down, and said, "You can't turn this back on unless you pay us money." And so turns out that the state of North Carolina relies 70% of their gas comes from that pipeline. So I was driving today past lines and lines of either gas stations that are closed and are out of gas, or people panic buying and going to the gas station and just filling up their car because they're worried about it running out. And that pipeline still hasn't been opened, even though this attack was on Friday. And so my parents were worried about being able to get back up to Jersey because they were down visiting for the weekend, and fortunately they were able to get out today, which is awesome news for me as someone living in a tiny house and working from a tiny house. But the thing that I tried to explain to them is this isn't something where you just like pay them the money and you can turn it back on. We're talking about literally a flammable liquid here. And so the problem is once you get infected, there's no telling how deep they've infiltrated. So the first thing you do with a virus is when you get through a back door, you don't do any damage. You don't start capturing anything. You don't start. The first thing you do when you get a virus through the door is go create another back door, so that you can, if the virus gets removed, you can use another vulnerability and get in. And so once you have found a vulnerability like this, it isn't as simple as just removing the virus or paying the ransomware and going on with your day. You also need to make sure that while you were compromised, they didn't affect any of the other systems that they then got access to. So even if you do get rid of this virus or pay off the ransom amount, it isn't as simple as like, okay, flick the switch back on and we're good to go. So security is definitely going to be covered. We have a security expert coming in and teaching that module in for you guys. I believe it is the last module or close to one of the last modules in the program. And that will be taught through the perspective of how do I make my code secure? Because security exists at every level. It's not just the code you write, but where you deploy your code and what policies that you have set up, right? You can be Fort Knox and have a really secure server and have really secure code and encrypt all of your information. But if you let your user set a password and they set their password to password, now all of a sudden, all of your great security goes out the window, right? Security is only as strong as your weakest link kind of thing. So really great module that is coming up on that. You have a much better teacher than who taught it in cohort 1, which is awesome. That was me. But the way I taught security was kind of through the lens of this is what I have been forced to learn through security. And this is where I know, I've had to make my security better from only a coding perspective. Fortunately, the person teaching the security module is an expert in all kinds of security. And so you will have a very fun-filled 4 days with that instructor. If you would like to pull code from the code base, if you are not caught up from last night, you can definitely go to the GitHub desktop and open up the code base folder and pull and use that as your starting point. I will say do not throw out what you were working on yesterday, though, because you should this weekend kind of start from scratch or start with wherever you're up to until this point, and then incrementally get to the final product, which I'm hoping it is going to be tonight. So on the homework assignments, there is a weird way of me telling whether or not you just copied and pasted most of the code. And that it really comes down to your coding style. And that sounds weird, but everyone's coding style is a little different. And when I open up code without knowing who wrote it, I can tell you which member on my team wrote it. And even though we have a style guide, and even though we have ways of uniformly writing code together, it is like a digital fingerprint without actually looking at who created the file and all of that. I can just read code and know who wrote it. So not meant to intimidate you, but the goal of the homework is to make sure that you're staying up with what we're doing in class. And the goal of setting it for a Sunday due date and accepting late submissions is, we get that sometimes it may take an extra day or two for you to get it finished. And even if that's a week later, still submit it, because that's a really good benchmark for us to know that you guys are progressing in class. And Karen threw out a great note in chat. It is technically not the last module. It is the last module for new content. And then the last week is used for capstone and having all hands on deck for all mentors, all students, making sure that you guys are making the progress that you need to before you show off at demo day at the end of the program. Any other questions? Okie doke. Let me, I'm on my wrong monitor. Give me 1 second. Okay, so I'm going to pop open my VS Code. I am going to share my screen before someone gets the chance to tell me I am not sharing my screen. And I am going to pop open my index.html. I am going to reveal in Finder. And I am going to open up that in Chrome. And this is where we ended up last night, where we can click in our text and type something in and hit send and see it show up. So the first thing that I am going to do, I don't like leaving dummy data in my HTML, right? So when we come over here and refresh, it's like we've got all this in here, but as soon as we send it, it clears it out. So what we are going to do is migrate that over. So let's look at where we were at. When we added our message to our message array, we added an object in there, right? And that object had 3 things. It had text, which was the value of the message. It had an I sent it true, and it had a timestamp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to my messages array, and I am going to say my text is going to be, we're going to carry on the Mother's Day theme. Not quite sure why my brain went there, but it did. We are going to add a timestamp, and the timestamp will just use the current time. And then for our I sent it, I will make this one true. And then I'm going to pop back over here and grab our other message, which we didn't really set up. So I'm going to come outside of my object. I'm going to create a new object, and I am going to say, before you guys yell at me, I'm going to split my screen and turn on wrapping because that was really good feedback. Okay, so let me push this over. Okay, so we're going to do text, and we'll say, thank you, child. And we will say timestamp new date. And don't forget your comma because we comma separate our objects. And then we are going to say I sent it is false, just so we can test that on both sides. And then I'm going to come over to my HTML, and I am going to delete out my two messages that are already in there because we already have our dummy data loaded into our messages array. So what we want to make sure is that we are getting the right divs. So it's going to be this div class row message and everything underneath it. Then it's going to be another div row message and down to here. We don't want to delete our div ID messages because we need that to hook in and put the messages in there. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to save. I'm going to come back over to my browser and I'm going to refresh. No messages. Okay, I'm going to come back over to my JavaScript and I'm going to console log out my messages. And I'm going to come over here. I'm going to pop open my console. I'm going to refresh. And lo and behold, there are my messages. So what are we missing? What's the rule? Inner HTML, Brandy, you're on the right track. Yeah, so what's the rule with whenever we add something to our JavaScript array, we also need to go update our HTML. Exactly. So all we need to do here is say update HTML. Because we already have that function written all the way down here, and it's looping over messages and doing all the magic of generating the HTML. So we're going to save, come back over here. We're going to refresh. Well, that's interesting. We've got one of our messages, but where's our other one? So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to remove out the, oh, I already removed the console log. I'm going to come down here, and I am going to go inside my loop. And I am going to console log out my message. Actually, I already was doing that. Okay, so I've got my console log message. I come over here, I refresh. Okay, well, it's logging out my other message. We can see it here. So let's go back to our code and bring this over. What are we missing? So at this point, we should look at our update HTML and we should be able to know what every line is doing. And so what I like to do is code is all about translating, right? No one writes code. What ends up happening is you figure out what you're trying to get the computer to do in English, and then you translate that English into code. So it's helpful sometimes to work in reverse. Sometimes it's helpful to read the code and say what the code is doing in English, right? And so, okay, const messages div. We are creating a variable called messages div, and we are making it as a placeholder for something. Okay, what's that a placeholder for? Document means our HTML document, and we are going to get the element that has the ID of messages. And then we are going to store that into our messages div. Great. We come down here, let. Okay, we're creating another variable called HTML to update, but this time it's going to be something that can change. And we are going to make that start out as an empty string. Okay, great. For loop. For means loop. All right, we're going to do something every time we see something in an array. Okay, const message. That means we are setting up a variable that we are going to access down the road. And we are going to, for each thing in the loop, we are going to go to the messages array, which we have all the way up here at the top. So the first time we run through the loop, it is going to be that object. Everything that I have highlighted is going to be accessible in the object called message. And the next time the loop runs, we're going to get access to all of that. Okay. So now we come down and we're in our loop, and we know this loop is going to run 2 times because there are 2 objects in the array. And all this loop is doing is it is going to console log out the message. And we know it's console logging out the message because we can see each individual object, right? Very hard to work with arrays or lists for the computer. But as soon as you break that list down into each item that is in it, it becomes much easier to work with it. Okay, so we console log it, and then we say if the message is I sent it, then we are going to say, hey, take HTML to update and add to it. That's what the plus equals is doing. All of this HTML gobbledygook. But we are going to stop in there and say, hey, instead of putting in message.text, because we have $ curly braces there, we are going to stop putting in the literal thing, the string that we've put in there, and we are actually going to drop in the value of message.text. And same thing for down here. Instead of putting in the timestamp, we are going to use format date, which is up here. It's going to do all of this code, and it is eventually going to return out the time that we want formatted. Okay. And then it's going to come down here, and it's going to keep running this loop. So out of that explanation, anyone see why our other message isn't showing up?
I sent it is, it's only going to run if it's true.
Yeah, you got it. Where did you send that, Kyle?
Send what?
Oh, sorry. I thought you said that you sent that in chat. Never mind. Ignore me.
No,
So,
I sent it is only going to run if it's true. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
duh. Okay, now I got it. Sorry. I thought you meant I sent it in the chat, and you meant I sent it is the object property. Hence why it was a bad variable name that I made last night. Anyway, sorry. So yes, I sent it is going to be true for the first message, and then for the second message, it is going to be false. So it is going to hit our else statement. So to prove that, we can take our console log message and stick it in the else statement. And what that is going to do is when we run it, we are going to see that message is there, right? So at this point, I am going to regret deleting my HTML before we had tested to make sure that it was working in our JavaScript. So I'm going to hopefully undo because I need to make sure that we're matching all the styling that we already had. So I'm going to come back to my JavaScript, and I'm going to take this whole thing, copy and paste it because it's doing most of the right things. And then I am going to compare it to the HTML that we have working over here with user message text. So I'm going to compare that, and I'm going to say, hey, our div class row message, that is the same. Now, what we don't have is this div class call2 when it's a message that we did not send. So I'm going to delete that out. We still have our call10 that we had over here, but we do not have our text end. So we're going to take that out. And then the other thing we added was user message text. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste it over here. And now we're going to test. So I'm going to refresh. Well, we were close. Missed something there. All right, let's see. We've got div class row message. We've got our col10 and our user message text.
That needs to go down one on your span.
That goes down there. And now, when we refresh, we get the right thing. See all this invaluable debugging experience you're getting from me? Totally intentional. That's sarcasm, by the way. All right, so now we can delete out our divs because we know that the data is coming from our JavaScript. So come over, we refresh, and everything's looking good here. And just to prove it's coming from our JavaScript, we can just delete out like an exclamation mark, refresh, and it updates in the message. Okay, all of that is great, but let's go back to the timestamp issue. What Kyle noticed is what happens if the time is 12 o'clock military time. 12 o'clock military time is not AM. 12 o'clock military time is PM. So all we need to do is say if hours is equal to 12 o'clock on the nose, then is AM is going to equal false. And our hours, we're not going to do anything with those hours. We're going to leave it right at 12. But then we're going to come down here and we're going to say else if the hours is greater than 12, right? So we think through our logic chain here. We say if hours is equal to 12 on the nose, then is AM is false, which means we will see PM. Because this if ran, this else if is not going to run. And so the reasoning behind that is because this is true. So else if doesn't matter. So this will be the only block that runs. And then I believe there was another time if it is, we can say else if hours is equal to, and I believe it's going to be a 0. Then we would say is AM is equal to true, and then we are going to set our hours to 12. Right, so 0 military time is 12 AM or right after midnight, and so we just add in those special exception cases. And so there is actually a way to tell the computer a timestamp. So if we do new date JS, we can look up the parameters and see that the parameters can take a string where we can actually pass in a timestamp and it will convert it for us. So I'm just going to take that exact thing and I'm going to put that up in my new date, except I am going to set it to 12:01, which should be 12:01 PM. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to refresh, and I got 12:01 PM. And now I'm going to change this to 001, which should be 12 AM, and refresh, and we got our 12 AM like we wanted to. Now, there are all kinds of weird exceptions due to time zones. There are some states that don't use daylight savings time. There are some weird exceptions with leap years. There is about 5,000 lines of code written around, well, what if that weird thing happens? What if you ask for a year from today and today is the leap day? Does that fall on February 28th or does that fall on March 1st? Well, if it's a year from today and you don't tell the computer how to handle it, it may pick one of those two dates. You may get a weird halfway point. There is all kinds of weird things that can happen. So I will share after class a couple libraries that you can use. For years, the dominant date library was one called Moment. And Moment worked great, and they added in time zone support for it as an additional plugin, but it got depreciated about a year ago. And what depreciated means is it didn't just disappear, right? It's not like it got deleted. There are still, I would probably say, over 1 million projects using Moment. Moment was like the de facto go-to date library. But they recognized that there were some issues in the approach to how they coded out Moment. And they said there are better libraries or packages out there that handle dates better. And so date FNs, DATE-FNS, is a popular one. Another one is called Luxon, Luxon, and that was made by the same person who made Moment. Those are all great options. We use Luxon at work, and it works great for things like adding times together or figuring out the difference between two times. Some code I actually wrote last week was, hey, we need to figure out the last time a blood pressure cuff reading was taken. And so we knew what the current time was, and we knew the timestamp of when the reading was taken. But then we had to do date math. And date math is always interesting because you don't know what unit you're working in, right? So you could go, well, I want days, but the computer is probably working in either milliseconds or seconds. So it becomes very hard to say, oh, subtract some time from a date. It's like, well, subtract what unit of time from a date. So Luxon and date FNs are two that I can personally recommend. But to attempt to not be opinionated, we are going to use a newer thing built into JavaScript called date-time format. And date-time format, if we just do a search for JS date-time format, we get the MDN, the official JavaScript documentation for all these ways that we can work with the date-time format. So something as simple as, hey, create a new date-time format, set in the locale, right? So we're saying, all right, in the US, this is, we want to format the date so it shows up this way in the US. And then we pass in the date object that we created up here. And that will actually return out the date. Now, this documentation is great, but it goes on for a while. And it is very detailed, right? And what you can do with it. So instead, if we go back, you will find that there is a devhints.io and there is a cheat sheet there. And the cheat sheet is helping you with things that you want to jump to. And one of those things is the options it supports, like custom formats and times. And so that is going to do a lot of the work for us. So what I am going to do is I'm going to jump back to my code. I'm going to comment out this entire block that says format date. And I'm going to create a new one that says function format date that takes a timestamp. And in there, I am going to borrow all of this code. And here, instead of passing in date, I'm going to pass in the timestamp that we got from our parameter. And basically, we're saying we want the hour, the minute, and the second, and we are going to use the default format here. So I'm going to save. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go back to my chat. I'm going to refresh. Now we've got undefined here. Well, that's not what we want. But if we look in our console log, we are getting exactly what we want there. And so again, this is the computer doing exactly what we told it to do. So we are going to hop back to the code, and instead of console logging it, we are going to return it. And we're going to get that on the same line so it's happy. And I'm going to jump back over here. I'm going to refresh, and now we got our timestamps back. But because we are relying on the browser function of international date time format, it's doing all of this work for us. And trust me when I say that this is probably 1/100th of all the exceptions that you would have to do. Times aren't quite as bad, but as soon as you start working with dates, dates are incredibly hard to work with, which is when you want to use a library for all of that. So I'm going to take a break here. I'm going to encourage you all to catch up to get format date working. And if you do get format date working, I'm going to share the link to the date time format. And you can play around with trying to get a date to show up, or a date and the time, or just the time, or whatever you want to play around with. So I'm just going to share the JavaScript code because we didn't change anything in our HTML. So that is now in Slack. And I am also going to share the dev hints page. And I'm going to leave that on the screen. And if anyone has questions, feel free to shout them out.
Max, I just didn't see the top of your code. Where does it, so what line did you start to comment out on?
I commented out the entire
function.
format date. So 25 through 46.
Okay.
So basically the entire format date function, and then I created a new function also called format date. And that's
no, I saw that. I had the copy
Okay.
of that part. I just wanted my code to look uniform to yours. Is there a shortcut to comment all of that out? Like if I were to just highlight that section and comment it out, or do I have to comment it out individually?
Nope,
row by row?
definitely a shortcut for both commenting in and commenting out. You can use, if you're on a Mac, Command and Slash. If you're on a PC, it's Control and Slash. But if I'm in the right window and I hit Command Slash, it comments it all in for me. And if I hit Command Slash, it comments it out. If you have highlighted code, it will do everything that's highlighted. If you're on a single line and just want to comment out a single line without even having to highlight it, you can just hit Command Slash and it will comment out the line wherever your cursor is.
Perfect. I got it working. Thank you.
Hey, Max,
Yep.
I need to borrow Karen for a breakout room.
Karen, can
I'm a
you?
bit behind and ashamed of it.
No problem. The best place to start, Karen will be able to help you, but just pulling the Git repo and then using whatever's in the Git repo as your starting point for today will probably be the best path to catch up quickly. And then you can always go back later to catch up.
All right.
How many people can you raise? Can you give me a thumbs up if you would like me to go over the Git repo and pulling the code and all of that fun stuff? Okay, then Karen, I will let you do a one-on-one breakout room.
Can you scroll up or down a little bit? Thank you.
Okay, give me a open mouth if you're still working on getting your international date time format to work, and give me a thumbs up if you've got it working. Or you're not following along code-wise. Okay. Couple open mouths, so we will give it a
Can
second.
you just, well, yeah, okay, never mind. I was gonna say if I was the only open mouth, if you could just drop it into the resources on Slack, I could copy it from there.
It should be in the student pasted code C2 channel.
Got it.
The
That's what I meant. Sorry.
Yep, no problem. Ariel, do you want to share your screen?
No, I found it. When I went through the HTML, I had left part of the div in there. So I just lost the send at the bottom. I have it back though. Sorry.
Perfect, that will do it. So Carolyn, if you want to kind of just jump you up to what we're working on right now, you can copy the entire JavaScript file, paste it in, delete out function format date, and then try and work on typing that in and making sure you have that working. If you do want to kind of just jumpstart, just save a copy of your existing code as in, so you can always get back to that down
We
the
have
road.
like a practice folder for each day that each one iterates on top of the other.
Perfect.
It's going to take me a long time to do what you just said. So just go without me. I'm with you.
Okay.
It'll kind of get in here somehow.
There's no problem with you guys saying, you know what, I'm just going to learn better by watching, and then I'll go back and do it later. There is nothing wrong with taking that approach.
Yeah, I didn't quite finish yesterday's thing. So I didn't, I was sort of have loose ends from that, and I'm still kind of going, what, we're on functions already, so, but I'll be all right. So don't wait for me.
Got it. All right. For those who are trying to follow along, give me an open mouth. For those who are not following along or have it working, give me a thumbs up. Okay. I'm not seeing any open mouths, so we are going to keep going. I lied. There are 2 open mouths. Alina or Susan, do you need any help or just more time to work on it?
No, I just need more time to type, but I got it on the student pasted code, so I can copy from there.
Cool.
I'd rather type it out than just copy and paste it.
Susan, do we need to report murder? Okay. Yeah, if I will paste in the HTML too into Slack, just in case you want to kind of slingshot yourself to where we are at. That is completely fine to do. Otherwise, we are going to just keep going here a little bit. The good news is I'm hoping that we are done even earlier than usual, so we can so that there's extra time at the end of class to not only catch up, but to shoot off any questions that you may have. Okay, so let's go back here. We are going to go to our chat app. We're going to refresh. We've got our data up here. I can type in ABC and hit send, and it shows up. Okay. Now, wouldn't it be nice, because we don't have the server, because we're not actually sending any of these messages, wouldn't it be nice if we could make it so a user message showed up and that user message wasn't just preloaded when we load the page? So what we are going to do in our send message, we are going to create another function that says generate incoming message. Okay, well, generate incoming message, that's a great name, but we probably need to create a function for generate incoming message to tell the computer what we want to do. And so what we are going to do is something very similar to the send message. We don't have to worry about preventing the default event because that's just for the form field. That's already taken care of. But down here, let's keep going. We don't need the message input because we're going to just generate some text out. We're not actually going to be grabbing from the input field. Now, messages.push, that's what we need. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to paste in my messages push, and I am going to say, this is a computer-generated response. I sent it. It's going to be false, and the timestamp will leave as a new date. So simple as that, right? I'm going to save it. You can come over here. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type in ABC and hit send. Nothing. Where's my user-generated response? So I'm going to come back over here. What did we forget to do? Yep, Mel, you got it. We have to update our HTML.
Takes me a minute to get unmuted. It takes me longer to type anyway.
So we're going to refresh. We're going to type in ABC, and we get this is a computer-generated response. Okay, that's working. And it's as simple because we set our I sent it flag to false. It's doing all of that styling for us. It knows to put it over on the left. It knows to do all of that. So that's pretty cool. But it also feels a little fake, right? When we're in here and we refresh and we type in ABC, that comes up immediately. And this is actually a problem we had to solve. We create a lot of bots at work, and people actually didn't like that the bot was responding so quickly. They actually wanted to feel like the bot was typing or thinking of a response before the message showed up. And so what we are going to use is something called set timeout. And set timeout is basically a way to say, hey, JavaScript, wait a set number of milliseconds and then go ahead and send the message. So what we are going to do, we're going to use our arrow syntax there. We could also use a function in that code. But what we are going to do is we're going to move our generate incoming message into a set timeout. And then the second parameter of the set timeout is how long we want it to wait. So let's say 3 seconds. 3,000 milliseconds is equal to 3 seconds. So we're going to save that. We're going to come over here. We're going to refresh. We're going to type in ABC and hit send. And 1, 2, 3. And there's my computer generated response. Now you may say, why did I put the set timeout here? Why didn't I put it in the function? And that's totally a personal preference. If you wanted to move the set timeout down here, you could refresh, you could send your message, wait 3 seconds, and it would still appear. So totally optional. Oh, sorry. If you would like to do your set timeout in the function, or you would like to do it around the function that you are calling. So I know that syntax is a little weird. I'm also going to show you that this works exactly the same way if you just make that a function as well. So the reason why we need that function in the set timeout, whether you're doing the function with an arrow or you're doing it with the word function itself, is we basically need to tell set timeout, this is all the code that we would like to run on that 3-second delay. So you can see we're actually doing 2 things here. We are both adding it to the messages array, and then we are calling update HTML. So the reason we need that function is because there are multiple lines of code that we may want to run on that delay. So we're going to save that. We're going to come over here. We're going to refresh, and everything works as expected. Any questions on that? Do I have anyone attempting to follow along with me? Give me a thumbs up. Okay. I will give you guys just a minute to get your generate incoming message working. And I will update the JavaScript code in Slack. The message I sent at 6:13 today in Slack is up to date. For those who are not following along, does anyone have questions about the syntax or why we're doing something the way that we are or anything like that? Do one more fun thing with the timeout. So I have heard through the grapevine that learning JavaScript through math is the most fun way to learn it, and you would all really love some more math to do in your code. So we are going to do more math because I know how much you guys really love it. So there is a fun thing called math.random. Math, again, one of those special words in JavaScript where it just knows what to do. So if we do math.random and save that and come over here and refresh and send a message, we get this 0.2456 blah, 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 right? And if we send another message and we get another one, it's 729 blah, 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 blah. So JavaScript, oddly enough, does not have an easy way to say generate a number between 1 and 10 or any two set things that you would like. The only thing JavaScript knows how to do is generate a random number between 0 and 1. And so what we actually have to do on that is say, we are going to say const time to wait. And then how do we move a decimal point over? We're going to multiply it by 10.
Shah had a question. Why do you create the computer generate message?
Yeah, so the reason why we're doing that is because we're trying to simulate a message that you haven't sent to come back in. And so we created it as a separate function because it kind of makes sense as its own standalone thing. We could take all of this code and put it right up in the send message function, and it would work exactly the same way. But in terms of organizing our code, whenever you can say, hey, these couple lines of code are kind of doing their own standalone thing, that's when you want to break it out and make it your own function. So we wouldn't have generate incoming message if this were a real chat app. If people could send you incoming messages, we would be doing that. But the point of this is primarily to show you how set timeout works and how we can put our code on a delay. But it is also it's also making sure that that functionality is working and that we can test our HTML. Hopefully that answered the question. If not, feel free to. Perfect. Okay. So what we're going to do is we are going to console log out our time to wait. And what that is going to do is if we refresh and we send a message, we get 3.67. And if we refresh and send another message, we get 4.95, right? So those are all great because they're all going to be values between, I guess, technically 0 and 10. And that's kind of the number of seconds we may want to wait. So again, this is just completely optional, But what we are going to do is say time to wait may not be the best variable name because we don't know what unit that is in. So we will call it seconds to wait. And then in order to convert from our seconds to milliseconds, we multiply by 1,000. So again, to go over this, we create our variable called seconds to wait. We get math.random, which is going to be a random number between 0 and 1, likely some kind of decimal. Then to get it out of a decimal, we multiply it by 10. And then we now have our seconds, which is going to be something between 0 and 10 seconds. And we multiply that by 1,000 to get that value in milliseconds. So if I save that, I come over here and I refresh and I send a message. That one came in very quickly. But if I send another message, it came in. And so let's just to show this, we're going to console.log and we'll say milliseconds until send. And then we will say seconds to wait times 1,000. So I come back over here, I refresh, I type in ABC, I hit send, and the milliseconds until that particular message sent was 23. But if I send another one, it is going to wait 8,000 and some milliseconds. And so that is 8 seconds. And then by the time the 8 seconds has passed, it shows up. So you may look at this code and go, well, that's dumb. When am I ever going to use a random number to delay how fast the computer is running code? I can actually tell you that I have written code that based off of the length of the message that is coming back, we adjust how long it looks like the computer is thinking about typing and sending that message. So we use a more complicated variation of this math.random to delay the computer in sending a message. So it feels like the bot is actually typing, and shorter messages, the bot's typing for a less amount of time. And for longer messages, it's more time waiting to see the bot typing before the message sends. The end of the day, we actually have the text generated in a couple milliseconds, right? The bot knows exactly what it's going to send back, but we just artificially delay that using set timeout and math.random to delay the amount of time it takes. Any questions? Anyone want me to pause so they can catch up? Okay, give everyone a minute. Most of the code that we just did is all in this generate incoming message. And the only line that we added was this generate incoming message to the end of send message. And I will also update this code in that is now up to date in Slack as well. If you are not coding along and you're just listening and understanding, I would recommend that you take notes on what steps we are doing so that when you do go back tonight, obviously you can rely on the video. Obviously, the video is all going to be in order. But getting the order of what things we are doing them in, as opposed to just starting at the top of the code and working your way down, is definitely going to help your understanding of everything, right? And that will be more beneficial when you open up a blank file and go, where do I even start? That repetition of working on those steps is going to make it much easier for you to write your own code from scratch.
I don't need that math.random thing you just did. I wasn't paying attention because I was trying to get my own code to work, but I can leave that out for now, right?
Yeah, the math.random is completely fine. The set timeout is what you want to practice
Yes,
with.
that's what I was working on. Okay.
Perfect. math.random, totally extra credit, but it is as long as you understand what math.random is doing, you don't need to worry about the math of converting to seconds and multiplying it and all that stuff. I did paste it in Slack, Ariel. If you go up to the message that I sent at 6:13, I just keep updating that one message in Slack so we don't have a very long Slack of just every checkpoint along the way. So even though it says I sent it at 6:13, I've updated it much more recently than that. Dominique, do you have a question?
I do. It's a random one and it might be a little too much.
Okay.
Just randomly speaking, since we're doing the timestamps for like when the message comes in, is there any way that the color can also change? Like how on Apple, you know, you can kind of see when somebody read the message or it goes from like blue to green or green to blue. Is there any way to do that within JavaScript?
Yeah, so we're kind of already doing that. I think on iMessage, they may have them flipped. But if it is, well, let me check. No, iMessage does it this way. So any message that you send that goes over iMessage, it goes blue. And then any text message that isn't over iMessage, this bubble turns green. But the incoming messages are always gray, no matter how it gets set up. The one thing that iMessage does that regular text messages don't is they will show a little thing that says like user is typing, which in iMessage it shows up as 3 dots. Slack does the same thing, right? It will say like your username is typing and other people can see while you're typing. So let's go down that implementation path because that's a kind of a cool thing, and it will give us practice with our arrays. So what we are going to do is we are going to say generate incoming message. But before all the random stuff, what we are going to do is we will say messages.push. And this is, I'm going to go for the least complicated implementation here, but we'll say the message is going to be person is typing. And is sent it is going to be false. And then the timestamp is still going to be a new date. And I've got a comma there. And so let's just save that and see what it does. So we come over here, we refresh, we send a message. And new date is not defined. What's my error message? Because I forgot a space here. And I also, whenever we update our JavaScript array, we have to call update HTML. So again, what we're doing is we're putting a new message into the array. As soon as we send the input into the array, we update HTML. Then we say generate incoming message, which jumps us down to this function. And all we're doing is adding another message to the array that says person is typing, and then we update the HTML. Then we drop down here, come up with a random amount of time to wait, and then we send in the user-generated response. So we save that, we come over here, we refresh, we send a message, and we get undefined. And if we wait long enough, we should get the computer-generated response. Okay, well, undefined is clearly not what I wanted. I use the key message, but when we look up at what our object is actually looking for, or if we go down to our update HTML and look at the message, it is looking for the text property. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to say text, save, refresh, send a message. Then we get person is typing. And if we wait long enough, we will also get the computer generated response. Well, that's cool, but person is typing, the person isn't typing anymore, right? That message got sent. So what method would we use what array method would we use to remove that last thing in the array? We are going to use a splice, yes. And where are we going to put that splice line? So the other way of thinking about that is, when do we want the splice to happen? So we don't want person is typing to go away until the message is ready to get sent. And so what we're going to do is, inside this set timeout, that is when we are going to splice out the user's typing message and push in the message that is actually getting sent. So we are going to say messages.splice, and VS Code's helping us out here, saying, where do you want to splice out? We want to splice out messages.length -1. So, and that is how we get to the last element's index, right? Messages.length is going to have, at this point, this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. So what we want to do is we want to get to index 3. Well, the array length is not 0 indexed. So messages has 1, 2, 3, 4 messages in it. But we are looking for the index of this message, which is 3. So to get that last index, all we're doing is taking the array length, which is 4 messages, and subtracting 1 out, which gives us 3. Now in our splice, we need to tell it one more thing, and that is how many things to delete. So we're going to say just delete one of them. And to make sure we understand how all of this is working, we are going to console log like crazy. We're going to console log our messages when we do the first message. We're going to console log our message right after we put in person is typing. Then we are going to console log our messages after we splice it. And we are going to console log even another time when we push our messages. So now every time we're updating the array, we're console logging out our messages so we can understand what's happening here. So we're going to save, we're going to come over here, we're going to refresh. And I'm going to type in ABC and hit send. And we've got all kinds of stuff happening in our console and an error on line 40. So let's fix on line 40 messages.splice. Okay, try that again. So let's test functionality. So I'm going to type in ABC, I hit send, ABC, person is typing, and then we get, this is a user generated response. So it's doing exactly what we want, but let's look at what's happening. The first time we console log is right after we add the message ABC that we sent. So if we look at this is not doing what I want. Let's do it this way. We see the first time we console log out the array, there are 3 messages in it, right? Hi, mother, thank you, child, and ABC. Then what we do is we add in person is typing, and we console log out messages again. So now when we console log out messages, we can see there are 4 objects in there. There are 4 messages. Those messages, hi, mother, thank you, child, ABC, and computer is typing. Then nothing happens for a while. We sit and we wait for this set timeout to run. Then what happens is we remove person is typing, which is this console log here when we're down to 3 messages. And then finally, we console log, we add our actual message we want to show up, and then we console log messages. So the problem that we're running into is you see this little I that shows up. When you hover over that, it says this value was evaluated upon first expanding. It may have changed since then. What Chrome is telling you is it's not doing a great job of dumping out the array and the objects in the array. It is only showing you the value of them when you clicked on that little arrow. So the first time this logged out, it did not, the thing that was showing up was not, this is a computer generated response. The thing that was showing up was person is typing. And so we can, I'm going to do a little thing that might help. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, so this you don't have to worry about the print array function I just wrote. I will go over it if anyone is super curious, but what I did is I made it print out the text of each message in my print array function. So the first time we hit send, we print out the array and it has the 3 messages in it, right? Then we add in person is typing and print out the array. Then we wait for that amount of time that's in our set timeout. We splice out person is typing, and then we add in the actual message that we want to send. So if you're looking at kind of the order of operations of how we got person is typing, we added the message that we sent. We add in a message called person is typing. We wait. Then we remove person is typing and add back in the message we actually wanted to send. No, that's kind of a lot. I'm hoping there is at least one question out of that. If you have looked at Joey's message in Slack, erase it from your mind. We will get to that tomorrow or Thursday. Array prototypical extending is on the syllabus, and it is something that I will cover tomorrow. Give me a thumbs up if you would like me to talk through how we got person is typing to show up again. Give me an open mouth if you want me to just shut up and move on already. So thumbs up to go over it again, open mouth to move on. Okay, I've gotten at least 3 open mouths, so I'm going to talk through it one more time. I'm going to go through it in the code first, And then I am going to go through it in what is console logging out. And then if anyone wants to share their screen and it's still stuck, I'm happy to do that as well. Okay. What kicks all of this off? The sending of the message is what kicks all of this off, right? So we have to do the stupid prevent default so the page doesn't refresh. We grab whatever the message input form element is, and we add that to our messages array. That's the first time we update the array. And what do we do in the array? We throw in the text and the fact that it was a message we sent, not an incoming message. We throw in the timestamp. Okay. Every time we update our array, we are going to console log out our array. Now, this print array function is something that I just whipped up so we can see the values a little more easily in the JavaScript console. So what I tried to do is console log out our array each time we update it. First time we update it, all we're doing is adding in the message that we typed in and hit the send button on. Then we update our HTML and we drop into our generate incoming message. Okay. In generate incoming message, we add yet another message. And this time the message says person is typing. And we put the timestamp on that, but I sent it to false. So it shows up on the left side of the screen. Now, whenever we update our array, I added in a console log so we can see what's happening under the hood. And I call update HTML again, because we need to show that new message that says person is typing. Now we come down here, we do some math to come up with a random amount of time to wait for the message to actually show up. Now we're in our set timeout. So whatever is in this function in here is what is going to run on the delay. So what we do before we add in the message that we actually want to show up, we have to remove the person is typing message. So in order to do that, we go to our messages array and we splice. And what we do is we splice out the last index in the array, the last object in the array. And in order to figure that out, we use the length of the array, and then we subtract one of it to convert the length, which is not 0 indexed, into the index where we subtract 1. Then this (1) is just saying we just want to delete out one item from the array. Then we console log our array because, as promised, whenever we update our array, we're also console logging it so we can see what's happening. And then the final thing we do is we push in the message now that we have removed user is typing, and we print out the array one more time. So looked at it code-wise. Let's look at this again. Nothing in my console. I type in ABC, and what's going to happen is every time we update the array, it is going to console log on a new line for us. So the first time it console logs, it says it adds in the message that we sent. We typed in ABC here, we hit the send button, ABC showed up, and ABC is here. Next time we update the array, we pass in a message that says person is typing. Okay? Then we console log out, hey, wait half a second before we remove person is typing from the array, which we did with the splice, and add back in, this is a computer generated response. So there are 4 separate times we're updating that array to get the person is typing thing to work. Did it make any more sense the second time through it than the first time? Okay, I'm going to copy and paste this code. And that is now updated in the message from at 6:13 today. So that JavaScript is all up to date. Does anyone want to share their screen if they're stuck somewhere?
I'm still getting undefined instead of person is typing, so I could share my screen if no one else wants to.
Go for it.
Cool.
It's important to remember that at no point in your career will debugging just be this like really quick thing that just happens, right? Debugging is something that I probably spend over half of my day debugging and then 3 minutes fixing wherever I found the bug. So important to remember that debugging isn't just something that, you know, because you're learning is that. Okay, so what is happening here is, let's go to your browser first.
Okay.
Okay, so Happy Mother's Day is showing up. Thank you is showing up. And if we scoot that down, we'll fix that scroll issue later. But I'm guessing your undefined is behind your send button.
Yeah. I thought we were gonna do flex later, so I figured that wasn't really a problem.
Gotcha. Yep. No, that's fine. So let's go back to your code and let's go
Yeah,
to
I see what you wanted me to do. Well, no, there's no way to get to it, is there? I just have to get rid of my there.
Okay, so go ahead and send a message and let's figure out where your undefined is.
You want me to go back to the console?
No, you can just hit send. It
Okay.
should show us. Okay, so there's our undefined. And if we wait long enough, it switches it back. So we know we are accessing the correct message text somewhere. It's just in our person is typing that we know the problem is at. So let's go back to our code. Let's look at update HTML because that's what's actually making it show up.
Right.
And I'll show you a trick. If you hold in
actual
if you hold in command and click on update HTML,
okay,
it will actually jump you to the update HTML function.
Oh, cool.
So that's a quick way to navigate around your code. Okay, so let's look at our message. Our message is an object and it is looking for message.text, which is what actually makes it show up.
Wait a minute. Message. Okay.
So we have our array messages, and as we're going through it, right, our messages array is here and we're passing it to message here. And then message is coming down through here, and we are using that object to look for the text.
Okay, right.
So if we go up to where we add in the first message, the thing that gets typed in the text box and gets sent. So scroll up a little bit to our messages push, and we're using text and passing in the value. So all of that looks good there, and we know that's working. So what we know isn't working is when it says person is typing. So let's scroll down to where we have person is typing. Too far. There.
Okay.
So person is typing is showing up,
Oh,
but we're adding it into something called message. And we don't want to
Yeah.
add it to message. We want to
That's
add it to text. And it should just be text. It shouldn't be message.text.
oh,
And
Okay.
that's why it was working even when we had this as a computer generated response, because we were adding it to the text key. And so now that you have text there, which by the way, that is a mistake that I made when I was coding it. So if you were
Oh.
just copying what I was doing, I happened to fix that in one of the
I didn't
quick
catch when you
switches of the
fix it.
screen.
Fix it because I was trying to catch up. Okay.
All good. So now let's go back and make sure it's working before you stop your screen share.
Did I save? I don't know. Now I did. Yeah, now it's working.
And
Thank
there you go. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'm getting the vibe that I may have gone a little too fast. So we're going to take a break. We're gonna make our break until 7:30 instead of making our break at 7:15. And I'm hoping that you will take the extra time to catch up to where we are at. The updated code is in JavaScript. I'm sorry, is in Slack. I'm only halfway through my coffee, thank God. So I'm going to continue drinking that. I will be here if you have any questions. And Latonia, feel free to share your screen. And you guys can all go on break and just be back at 7:30 and try and catch up on the code.
So no real updates to the HTML.
Correct.
The things you deleted, we put back kind of between yesterday and today.
The
Or
things we deleted are not in the HTML, but the things that we deleted will not impact the JavaScript at all.
yeah, I remember though, we did some changing of levels and anyway. And of course the JavaScript keeps reinventing itself. Did we do anything different in the style sheet?
Nope. Style
So
sheets
that's
are all the same.
okay. All right.
And the
So I've got-
HTML, you don't need to make any changes to. All the changes that we made are in the JavaScript.
Yeah, okay. So I can use the updates I'm doing that I'm putting in my practice folder, I can use as my guide
Correct.
when I'm typing and
You
trying
got
to
it.
get this stuff in here. This is where I start to sort of get like, function, object, who, what,
So this is we're taking a break for a reason. Hopefully
Yep.
getting everyone caught up.
Yep.
And while you are typing it, if you've got a question of like, why is this a curly brace? I see he put a curly brace, but why is this a curly brace? That's when you should pump the brakes and go, Max, what's happening here? Because that's when I go into it and I go, all right, this is an object. We know it's an object because it's a curly brace. Here are the properties inside of that object, and we can start pulling it apart.
Yeah, that part's not so bad. It's just how it all communicates, you know? So anyway, all right. I gotta get something to eat. I haven't eaten.
Go for it.
Back.
Latanya, what are we looking at?
I'm sorry. Okay, so I figured out, I think it's just one line of code that was the difference between what I had over here in my backticks, where we copied out our message,
Yep.
which I think is from,
Yeah, you got it.
from here to here.
No,
here,
too far.
right? One too far?
So those are two separate messages, right?
Oh, okay. So it's just this one.
Yep.
Okay, so here.
Yep. One more div down.
Oh, is it?
Yep. 42 through 51.
Okay. Okay, so I was trying to update this part. The only
Yep.
thing that I changed here, my other stuff was CSS stuff, is I wanted to add a bound. I called it a bound stamp.
Okay.
Where you know how you see messages and it says outgoing,
Yep.
incoming. So that's what
Yep.
that is. So I was hoping you could help me. Like I plugged this in. I don't know if I did it right. Like how we did the timestamp where instead of the actual whatever we typed in, it would be.
Yeah, kind of. The only thing that's missing there is you just have like class bound stamp. We need to get the div in there as well.
Oh, here?
Yeah.
Oh.
And okay, and that looks good.
Oh.
And then message.bound stamp. Is that actually added to your message object?
No, that's why I was asking you, because I wrote down what I need to do. I think I need an if-else statement where the outgoing is the value for all of the ones for I sent it. And I can set the incoming for all of the other messages since there's only 2 of them.
Yeah,
Does that
so
make sense?
the bound stamp we can figure out already off of I sent it, correct?
Yes. Meaning we can set that one as like true if it's coming from that one. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So what we're gonna do is we can actually go back down to your update HTML. We're gonna delete out everything that is in the curly braces. Whoop, there.
Where are we? Oh, here? I'm
No,
sorry.
go down to the right in there. We're going to delete
Oh.
what's between the curly braces.
Okay. Between here.
Yep.
Okay.
And then we are going to say message.isentIt, and then space, question mark, space, and then quotes. And then if you sent it, it's going to be outgoing. So type in
So-
outgoing.
So right, outgoing.
Yep.
Okay.
And then outside of the quotes, space, colon, space, and then quotes, and then incoming. Okay, so before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's save that. And I just
Okay.
realized we can simplify that even further, but let's test and see if this is working
Okay.
first. So hop over to your Chrome.
Can you see that okay?
Yep, and refresh.
Hold on, let me just do this so I can pop it.
Okay, and so there's your outgoing, and it even updated the time. So we know that that is working.
Oh, good. Okay.
The problem is we don't have our incoming working, right? Because
Okay.
we have another message there. So let's go back, and what we have going on is we've got our if message I sent it. Oh,
I'm sorry, I keep doing that to you.
it's okay. We have our if message I sent it, and then we do all of this HTML work in here, and that's all lovely. But what if the message is not sent? Well, we've got our empty else hanging out in there. So what we can do is we can take our HTML to update on line 55 and go all the way down to line 66
Okay.
and copy that.
Hold on. Let's see. Oh, you said 66. I'm sorry. Hold on.
Oh, you're good.
55 to 66. Copy that. Okay.
Throw that in your else statement.
In here.
Yep. And then there is just one or two adjustments we need to make. We need to take out this div col2.
This whole thing here.
Yep.
Oh, hold on.
From there down to there. Yep. Go ahead and take that out.
Okay.
And then we have our user message text that we added over in our HTML.
Yes.
So we want to add that in the same place in our JavaScript.
So here.
Yep. You can add it before or after that either. Oh, it has both message text
we need them
and
both
user
in there.
message text.
Okay. User message text.
Okay. And then save that and let's
Okay.
see what happens.
All right.
Well, that's interesting.
Hmm.
Okay. Let's go up to the top of your JavaScript file. Okay, and so we got text, which is empty there. So go ahead and add a message in there. And save that. And I think that is going to solve it being empty, but not solve our formatting issue.
Okay.
Okay, so that's good. Now let's go down to our update HTML. And I think there was one more class difference. If you command click on update HTML, it will jump you to that section of the code.
Okay.
And then scroll down a little bit. And the other thing that we did is we have text end here, and we've got text end here. But if we look at our HTML, we've got text end on the messages we send, but no text end on the messages we don't send.
Okay. So
we
you're
just
saying
need
this
to
one needs
remove-
to.
Yep, you got it. And save and jump back over and refresh. And that is exactly what we want. And we've got our outgoing and our incoming, which is cool. But let's go back to our code and clean that up just one time, because we already have our if message I sent it, and then our else down here. So we don't actually need a ternary operator or inline if statement there. We can make this curly brace always, this right in here, always be outgoing. And then we can make anything in here always be incoming because we're already checking at this if statement and this else statement.
Okay, so we're not repeating
Correct.
that content. Okay.
Yep. So you can take out that entire ternary operator that we just added and just make it say outgoing.
Okay, so this whole line.
Yeah, except for, yeah, you got it. That you
Right
can
there.
just type in outgoing.
Okay.
And then the entire line down here, except for, you know, ending right there.
This one to there.
Yep.
Incoming.
And then save that. And then you
Okay.
should be able to take a look and it should look exactly the same when you refresh.
Okay.
Got
no
it.
change. Okay. Okay, thank you. I was so worried I was gonna like lose my work. And then I was like, oh, it's literally just one line, but I didn't know how to integrate it. So I
All
can
good.
delete this.
Yes, you sure can. And you can delete the div after it as well.
Oh, wait, hold on. I think I did something without looking what it's doing. Okay, hold on. Let me get where I need to be. Okay, so from here to, you said 51.
Yep, you can delete that one. And then you can also now delete 44 through 50,
44
52.
through 50. Oh, okay. That's why I was miscounting the div because the end was right here.
Yep.
Okay. And we're good?
Save, go to your browser, make sure we didn't break anything, and you're good to go.
Thank you. Okay. Let me stop sharing.
Go ahead and share your screen, Susan, if you're up for it. And unmute yourself, please. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. It disappears for some reason. It's annoying.
It is. And it makes you look crazy because we can't see it when you share your screen. So it looks like you're just moving your mouse around in thin air.
Yes, like a nutso. I had format date spelled wrong, and then I changed it, and I thought it would fix it, and it did not, as you can see.
Okay, let's jump to your code.
And I also deleted a form, closing form tag on the HTML, and I found that, so I fixed that.
Okay, your format date definitely does exist and nothing is screaming out to me as wrong there. So let's, no, it's saved. Try going back into your browser and refreshing.
Oh. Let's
It's
see.
magic.
That's annoying. I did that. Oh, so wait, did I fix it? How do I?
You sure did. If you just, yeah.
Okay. Oh, that was it? I
That
just
was
didn't
it.
Save.
My
Okay.
mother calls it the Max effect. I swear it doesn't work until you're watching and then it just works. It's not fair.
Yes, okay. So yeah, my two errors were just literally like spelling and I deleted a tag and now it works.
Awesome. Good work.
Okay, thank you. I will do this.
Hey, Max,
Yes.
I was kind of playing around yesterday. Instead of using the long row for entering a text,
Yep.
in a lot of chats, it'll be a box.
Yep.
So I was looking up the Flexbox configurations for that. If I do that in the homework thing, is that okay?
Yeah, that's completely fine.
Oh, good.
You're
'Cause it
going to
just-
want to
it seemed-
use, instead of using input and the type is equal to text, you're going to want to use a input called text area instead.
Exactly. Yep.
But yeah, completely fine to use that instead.
Okay. And it was like this epiphany. It's like, oh, I can use that in my capstone.
Those are the
parts
light
where
bulb moments
user
we're hoping for.
enters stuff, you know, it would be my, so it's like, oh. All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Yep, no problem.
And thank you for the like extended break. I got a chance to get a little something to eat.
Good.
My son got his second Moderna today because he's done with finals. And then he wanted to share some music with me while I had some pizza they brought back for me from Kaz Pizza because I've hardly eaten today. So it was nice. Thank you. I needed it. Max, or he's gone. Okay, he needs a ring too.
Did you have a quick question?
Yeah, right. Sorry, you're so quiet. Oh, and he's back too. I think I'm using the updated JavaScript code, and when I'm refreshing the page, and then I'm typing in some messages, and I'm getting something interesting. Can I show it to you?
Yep, share away.
Go ahead.
Yeah, see that? Every time I send a new message, this they're like stacking. And I don't get the person is typing. I think it's the latest code, unless you did another one right after it.
No, this may be a CSS issue we have to solve. If you refresh the page, does it clear all of your messages out? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. We will start there and fixing it.
You and me and Karen, or in class.
We will fix that in class altogether.
Okay, great,
Because
wonderful.
that's not a you problem. That is that is an actual bug.
Thank you. That makes me feel so much better. Let's see, and stop share. Yeah, okay.
So I am going to, it is 7:30. There are only 2 more things that we need to add tonight, which are the edit and delete functionalities. And then we are completely done. So my goal is to do that. I'm going to go just a tiny little bit fast so we can be done in the next 15 to 20 minutes. And then I'm going to leave all of the rest of the class open to for the people who are up to date to get the edit and delete working. For the people who may be lagging behind, we will be around to fix it. So the reason I'm splitting that is because I think we're at 2 ends of the spectrum. Either the people who are caught up are really caught up and want to fly through the end, and then the people who are not caught up are pretty far behind and need a little extra time. So I'm going to go a little fast for the sake of the people who are caught up, and that will also leave time for the people who are not caught up to catch up at the very end of class. I don't know if that makes any sense, but makes sense in my brain. So we're gonna power through and go for it. Before you yell at me, I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. Okay. So we are making good progress. I'm gonna fix a quick bug of if I send a message and a person is typing is already cutting into my message bar, and if I send even another message, now all of a sudden it's scrolling, and we don't want that. So there's actually a pretty easy fix for that. In our style sheet, we have our messages and we set a height, but we want to use the overflow, and we're going to use the overflow X property. And we are going to say, hey, if anything overflows on the X axis, the up and X, Y. Did I get that wrong? Is that X the Y axis? Well, if it's wrong, we'll figure it out in a second. X axis is going across and then Y is going up and down. So the Y axis, when we scroll up and down, we want to say, hey, anything that's overflowing out of messages, throw up a scroll bar for that. So now when we come back over here and refresh, it's not what I wanted. We do ABC, we get our scroll bar here. Where did my edit come from? I saved you. Okay, we type in ABC, we hit send, it shows up there. We've got this scroll bar down here, which we'll fix in a second. But if we send another message, now it's down at that bottom so we can scroll. So all we need to do is in here, we say our overflow Y scroll and then our overflow X, and we can just make it hidden. So we refresh, we now have our scroll bar here. And if I type in ABC, it says the person is typing, and then it clears it and it shows it. And if we type in DEF, we can now scroll down and see the next message there. Now you may say, Max, wouldn't it be nice if every time you send a message, it scrolled to the bottom? And I would say yes. And if you can figure out how to do that, you can do that for extra credit. totally possible to do that. Chat apps obviously do that, but you can use .scroll into view to make that happen. But I am going to let you guys figure that out for extra credit if you would like. Okay, so we got our scroll bar in, and the only things we added to our CSS were that overflow Y scroll and our overflow X hidden. You can tweak those settings, and there is also one that says auto that I think would let it scroll, but wouldn't show the scroll bar until you got to the point of it overflowing. So feel free to play around with those properties, but we're just going to leave that there for now because this is a JavaScript project, not an HTML or CSS project, right? Okay, so let's go back to our script. So we've got two things we need to add before we can call this the finished product. We've got our create and our read happening, and we got fancy on our create and put it in the set timeout and all of that stuff, but we've got to get our update and our delete to happen. So looking at this interface, I don't want to show an update and a delete button for every one of these messages. I would kind of like to make it so when we hover over the message, maybe we get the option to edit or delete it from there. So let's get that working in our HTML. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go to my JavaScript because that's where we're generating out all the messages. And I don't want to give the user the option to edit or delete any messages that they didn't send. I only want to give them the ability to edit or delete messages they did send. So I'm going to work in this if I sent it, and that's all I'm gonna add this option to. So before my message text, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, hey, we've got a new div class and we'll call it buttons. And inside my buttons, I would like to add an A tag that gives me the ability to edit. And then I'll put just a spacing there. And then I would also like an A tag that would let me delete the message. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to come over to my code. I'm going to refresh. And there's my edit and my delete. And that's what I want, but I only want those to show up when I'm hovering over it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop back to my CSS. And in my CSS, towards the bottom, I am going to say, hey, anything in a message that has the class of buttons, make the visibility hidden. Okay, so I'm going to save. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh, and they disappear. Okay, so now we've got to tell it. We made it disappear. Now we've got to tell it to reappear. So we are going to use a selector for our message, but we're going to add a special thing. We're going to add a colon at the end of it and say, hey, when you hover over the message, go look at the buttons and make the visibility of those buttons visible. So when we save and we refresh and we come over here, nothing's there till we put our mouse and boom, we got our edit and our delete. And as soon as we move the mouse away, it disappears. Now, if I come over here and hover over it, nothing happens because we are only adding the buttons class to messages that we sent. So because we didn't add the buttons class down here, it's only going to work on messages we sent, which is what we want to happen. So we're going to come back over here. We're going to refresh. And even if we send a new message, now when we hover over that message, we get edit and delete. And if we come up here, we get our edit and our delete buttons. So that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. So last thing we need to do tonight is wire up our edit button and our delete button. So we are going to add an on click here that says on the click of edit, we are going to edit the message, and we're going to remember everything that we use with index because we need to know what edit button is getting clicked on. So up here, we are going to use our .entries method. And then in here, we can get access to the index in addition to just the message. So In our onClick, we are going to edit the message and we're going to pass it the index. And then in our delete, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add an onClick, spelled correctly. That calls our delete message function and passes the index. So I'm going to save. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. Everything looks fine. I'm going to hover on this. I'm going to click edit and I get edit message is not defined. I'm going to click on delete and I get my delete message is not defined. That's okay. Sometimes getting an error is an all right thing. We just proved that the onClick is actually working, right? That it's not throwing up on either the edit or the delete buttons themselves. So all we need to do is add our function for edit message, and that is going to take the parameter of index. And then we also need a function for our delete message, which takes the same parameter index. Now we need to say, we're going to say const new message text is equal to window.prompt. And we can say, what would you like the message to say? And all we need to do is go to our messages array. We're going to use the index that is getting passed into edit message, which is getting passed in here. And we know it's getting passed in here because we're looping over the messages to get the index. And actually, I made a mistake here. We want to use a template literal to pass that in. Right, so we literally don't want the word index to show up. We want it to pass in the value of index. So that's why we're using that template literal there. Otherwise, it would literally pass in the word index and we'd come up here and it would be like, I don't know what the word index is. Index is in a number. So by adding that template literal, we get access to the value of index. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to say messages index, and the text of the message we are going to set to the new message text. And then we are going to update our HTML. We update our HTML because whenever we update our array, we also have to get our HTML updating. And we're going to borrow most of this. We're going to say if window.confirm, are you sure you want to delete this? And if we are sure, we're not going to put too many curly braces. We are going to say messages.splice the index, delete one thing out, and update our HTML. Know all of that was super fast. I promise I will share the code with you, but I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh.
Good question.
Yep.
How does it know which message to delete?
Yeah.
Is it the one you just wrote and you're trying to get rid of it? Or are we going to go and do more to?
I'll show that code in 1 second. I'll
Okay,
trace
great.
through that.
Thank you.
So I'm going to click on edit. I'm going to type in ABC and hit OK. And my message updates to ABC. And I'm going to click on delete and OK. And there goes my message. So I'm going to copy and paste all 3 files into Slack. I'm going to talk through my delete index. I'm going to update the Git repository, and then I will be free for any of your questions. Okay, I'm going to see if I can. Okay. Okay, so in our update HTML function, if you guys already understand how it knows what message to delete, go ahead and use the code in Slack and get it all working. I will create a homework assignment for this. It will not be due until Sunday, but we probably won't be working on this code tomorrow or on Thursday. So all the code is in Slack. I will get it in the Git repository shortly and create the classroom assignment for it. But let's talk through this update HTML. So we've got update HTML. We are going to our array. And what this dot entries is doing is it is giving us access to both the index and the message itself. So before we had dot entries, we only had access to the message here. But because we're using dot entries, we now get the index of whatever message we're on and the message object itself. Okay, so we're going over this, we're updating, we're generating out the HTML. And what we are saying is, hey, whenever this edit button is clicked, call this function called edit message. And instead of passing in the word index, we're literally going to take the index here and add it into our onClick. So what happens is when our onClick actually gets called, I'm going to just draw to delete message. I meant to draw the lines on that. But same thing that's happening here. The index is also coming over to our delete message. So when we go up and we call delete message, we link all the way up to delete message, and we link our index all the way up to here. So now whatever index we're on in the loop gets sent up to our function delete message and also passes in the index. Okay, so now we do this if statement, right? And we say, if we confirm that the user actually wants to delete it, go to our messages array and delete out the index that got passed in from our parameter. And then we say 1 here because we only want to delete one thing in the array. And because we updated our array here, we then have to update our HTML because it will use the array and actually update the HTML to remove that message. Looks like a lot of gobbledygook, but I'm hoping when you play back the video and you see the arrows appearing, hopefully that will help. Does that answer your question, Carolyn? And I will do a I will try and do it in 30 seconds. We've got entries here. Entries generates out our index. Our index gets passed down into our onClick. Our onClick links it to the function and the index. The function comes up and links to the function up here. The index comes up and links to the index in the parameter. Index then gets passed into our splice. Our splice only deletes one thing out, and then it updates the HTML after it deletes out our message. Other questions? Okay, I'm gonna stop my screen share for 1 second. I'm gonna update the Git repository, and then I will be available for any questions. Joey learned something new tonight. He learned about dot entries in the for of loop. So just proof for you that I write code all the time, and I have my senior dev and I read his code and I go, I didn't know you could do that. So there is at no point do you ever learn 100% of JavaScript. There are always new features and new things to love. For of is definitely one of the newer types of loops in JavaScript, and just makes it so much easier to access the object directly that you're looping over instead of having to do your index and work with indexes. So code is up to date in Slack. Code is up to date in Git. I'm leaving the rest of class open to answer any questions. If you have it working, definitely chime in, celebrate your success, share it with the class, fill out the feedback form and get out of here. If you do not have it working, feel free to ask questions.
So Max, I just put all the updated stuff from Slack into my files that I'm playing with. And I'm not getting the someone is typing. We don't need that anymore.
Someone is typing should be working.
I mean, I just pasted it in, so.
It is working on mine. Let me make sure that I shared the correct code.
Yeah, I pulled this from what you put in Slack.
No, person is typing is definitely in there.
So when I click into the text entry box or whatever you want to call it, the row, and I say I type A to start ABC, shouldn't it start to say someone's typing?
No, only until you have to send the message, and then it will say a person is typing, and then it will show their message.
But you're not typing anymore, you sent it.
No, the point of that is to say the other person that you're talking to is typing.
Right, but you're not anymore.
It's
Oh,
not
they're-
that you're typing.
they
the
have
person,
to answer me,
correct.
but no one's answering me because it doesn't say it. Is someone supposed to answer me?
So if you type a message and hit send,
Mm-hmm.
then the other person that you're talking to will start typing and then send the message.
Right. But it was showing up, someone is typing and it's not showing up.
Do you want to share your screen?
Sure. I'm really good at that. Okay, it's good at something.
And as always, if you would like to drop until you have questions and then come back into the room, that's completely fine as well. All right, so go ahead and refresh the page. And I think part of the problem here is just go ahead and close out of your console. I think that you just couldn't see the fact that it was showing up. So now if you go into your text box and type something in.
And now it's way down there.
And then hit send. Now you get your person is typing. And then when the person is done typing, it is going to remove that message and show the message that they were typing.
Except, so we put that on a timer. That's what that is.
Correct.
Okay, got it. It's to simulate reality.
Correct.
That's why I type greetings, Earthling.
Yes.
I watch
Now-
the X-Files. What can I say? Okay.
It shouldn't be, it should only be a maximum of a 10-second delay.
Well, I've got two monitors next to each other and I've got my phone. Maybe I'm taxing our Wi-Fi because all of us are at home working on. Let's try again.
Oh, there you go. It just was on a very long delay, but it did eventually come up.
Because mine happened right away. I thought.
Correct. Right. Because think about the simulation. You send a message and then it's going to take the user between 0 seconds and 10 seconds to respond to it. And then their response is going to show up.
So person is typing 3 1000, 4 1000, 5 1000, 6 1000, 7 1000, 8 1000. It was only about 8 seconds.
But it's a random time that we picked there. So it's always going to be between 0 and 10 seconds.
Right. Which means it won't be 10 seconds. it could be
Correct.
9.99999.
Correct.
Yeah, I remember that from Gus. It's like, whoa. Okay, so it is working. So I have this code, but now I can go back to where I left off from yesterday and work forward, because copying and pasting is not going to teach me. It's just keeping me on track.
You got it.
And this, basically something that builds on this is going to be the weekend, one of the weekend projects.
The final version is what the assignment, like what you have working now is the entire assignment.
Okay.
So it's just getting caught up to getting
Yep.
all the functionality that we have working here in your own code and your own typed out thing. And that will be one of the weekend assignments.
Okay, and then if you want to stylize it or anything, once you get the functionality, then I can go back and work on that nested array thing.
Yep.
I sent you a screenshot with all the syntaxes. I could not figure them out in trouble. It's because I don't think the code is completely, I think it's missing stuff. So I got to figure that out. But I was a day late, so I still wanted to hand something in. But that will give me a chance to go back and play with that stuff. And I still owe Gus 3 things. So I'm aware of that. All right. Thank you.
No problem.
You're great.
Susan, do you want to share your screen?
Oops. Sure. Yeah, because I just did the set timeout.
Yep.
Does that mean because I didn't include this here that's why?
It could be your set timeout if you don't include a time on line 52 between the curly brace and the parenthesis, it will default to instant, which is kind of defeats the whole point of a set timeout. But I don't think you're far off. So if you go to your chat app, it should be working.
But I mean, I messed up some other stuff. See, I just.
That's fine. If you just
Okay.
refresh.
Yeah. Okay, refresh.
And then, yep.
See, it shows down there.
Yeah. So what's happening is it's instantly.
It's just showing up and replacing immediately.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
it's because I didn't include that time.
That delay, correct. So if in between, I think it was line 52, if you put between the parenthesis and the curly brace comma and just say like 3000.
Oh, I saw you did that and I didn't have that. This right here should
delay it by 3 seconds and then send the message.
Let me make sure I just saved that. Oh.
1, 2, 3.
Awesome. Thank you. And now I just have to figure out what I did here.
Yeah, you've got some hover states in your CSS that are a little off.
Yeah, I'll figure it out. Thanks.
Good luck.
It's me again. For in the JavaScript, the generate incoming messages function thing. I just can't talk tonight. Have a message push and the person is typing text. If is sent it is false, then the timestamp is a new date. I'm a little confused about what's happening there. Like,
so there's no if statement there. Anytime a message is sent, we generate a timestamp.
right, but it says is sent it false.
Correct. So if it is a message that I typed in, is sent, hold on. So whenever we add a message that I typed in and sent, we set I sent it to true because we want that message to be on the right and show up as blue. Whenever we are emulating the person sending a message back to you, like we are when we say person is typing, we set I sent it to false. That was a typo. I will fix that. Give me 1 second.
Oh, that makes a little more sense. Okay, good.
Yeah, it should be I sent it, not is sent it.
Yeah, that didn't. So I didn't send it. So new date, that just means the timestamp will show.
It will grab new date means grab the current time and save it
Mhm.
into the object.
Right, okay. Yep. I really gotta weave my way through this to see who's doing what to whom, so, but I'm glad I asked that. Does that appear anyone else, anywhere else in the code? I cannot talk. The is sent it as opposed to I sent it, or is that the only place?
That should be the only place. The I
Okay.
sent it is used in our update HTML method to figure out whether we are going to show it as a message that we typed in or a message that the user typed in.
Oh, I saw that somewhere else and I was like, what's that? Okay, okay. Yeah, thank you. So I think I just put something together. So I sent it as false. Oh, wait a minute. I just had it figured out how it went together. Yeah, I didn't send it. There's a person going to send it to me because they're typing.
Correct.
And rather than call it, person is sending it to me and all this nonsense, you got to have something that you can, yeah, not so verbose. Okay. Another connection made. Very good. Thank you.
Max, there's two questions in the chat. Ariel wanted to know what the difference between a modal and an alert was, and is one better than the other? And I didn't want to answer that because I know what it does in Angular, but I don't know if it's the same thing in JavaScript, and we both know how I feel about Angular. So, and then Shah said his screen is blank.
Yeah, let me start from the top and work my way down. So the difference between a modal and an alert is a modal typically shows up in your screen, and it is something that you can kind of close out of. So I'm trying to think if I can. Trying to think if I can think of a website that uses a modal that is not company-owned code that I can't show you. So a good example of a modal is when you're reading a news article and something pops up on the screen and it blacks out the screen behind it or grays it out and says, "Would you like to join our newsletter?" You're like, "No, go away. I want to read the article." That is a good example of a modal. So kind of functions the same way, but a modal is almost like a window that opens up on top of your existing window. So think about like a pop-up, but if it, instead of it being in a new window, it would be on top of what you're working with. So that is the most annoying example of a modal that I can think of, is when you're reading the article and it kind of pops up and you're like, "Get this out of here." We use modals all the time at work. When you're in something, you're working with something, and you kind of want to show a new window without bringing them out into an entirely separate window. An alert is something that is blocking the user. And so the alert has to be answered before you can interact with anything on the page. So very similar. Modals tend to be less aggressive. And if you are using them properly, it allows you to bring the user to another screen without taking them out of the context of whatever the current screen they were working on is. An alert is built into JavaScript, and it is native to JavaScript, and it normally is only a text. So you can ask a question. The variants of alert we have used so far are .prompt and .confirm. So they all kind of behave the same way with little differences. So .prompt just gives you a text box that the user can type into and hit OK. Confirm defaults the buttons to yes and no. So little variants of that. Modals are much easier to set up and use in React just due to the component nature of them. However, Bootstrap natively supports a modal as long as you have the script tag included that has the bundle. So if you would like to use a modal, you definitely can. There is a lot of overlap between a modal and an alert. Modals tend to be more friendly and give you a lot more control over what you would like to display to the user. The reason we did not use a modal is it would probably take 3 or 4 times as much code to use a modal instead of using window.prompt and window.alert. So it is very rare to see a window.alert, window.prompt, or window.confirm in production code. It is much more user-friendly to show a modal that does all of that same functionality. But because I didn't want to go down a rabbit hole of having 50 lines of code just to get my modal to work, I cheated and used .prompt and .confirm. If you go to the Bootstrap code, and I know I'm not sharing my screen, but let me confirm that I can get examples.
Yeah, I had taken one from the Get Bootstrap site for my capstone for like login and register, but I wasn't connecting it correctly. So that's why I wasn't sure if it was something that an alert would be better, but no, that was all. I just wanted to make sure I understood the difference. So thank you.
Yeah, a modal behaves like this. So you click on a button and it kind of grays out the screen behind you and then gives you close, save changes, but you get control over every part of this. So you can change modal title. You can make it so the close button looks different. You can change the text in here. You can change the buttons. You do get a lot more control. And this is very web app-ish feeling, right? So like on a website, a modal doesn't necessarily fit in. But if you are building a web app, a modal definitely makes a lot more sense. And you can see that this is a lot more user-friendly than the alert that we had pop up. You can also see that getting this modal to work takes a lot more lines of control, a lot more lines of code. So while you do get more control over it, it also takes a lot more code to make it work. So definitely better to use a modal. Downside to the modal is that you have to write a lot more code to get it working. So that is that question. Latonia, I will answer your questions next, but I want to let Shaw share his screen if he's still having a problem of it being blank.
Hi, Max. This is Shaw. Yes, so let me share my screen.
Okay, so let's start in the browser.
So let me type ABC. Send.
Oh, can you stop your screen share and then start it over again and share your entire desktop instead of just the VS Code window?
Sure. Desktop.
Okay, so right click and pop open your console. And okay, You can hit the little uncheck preserve log because it clearing when we refresh is actually what we want. So uncheck that and then hit the little gear in the top, the blue gear. I have to go to annotate the blue gear on the right there. Okay, and now refresh the page and we'll get a nice clear console and it says message.entries is not iterable. Interesting. Okay, so let's go to
Entries.
our JavaScript code and that's going to be on line 103. And I think all we're missing is the parentheses after the word entries. So right there, yep, open the parentheses and close the parentheses. You got it. Save, and I think that should fix you up. There you go.
Oh, thank you so much. That was quick. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, whenever you get into like it's just not working, always check your console first because that may be telling you about an error that you're not seeing because you don't have the console open or you don't have it cleared out.
All right. Thank you.
No problem. Happy to help.
Yes.
Latonia, not an embarrassing question, a very good question. How do we know how to use single or plural? There is a very clear difference between them. In your code, we are using both single and plural in this line alone. And so we say messages here. Why am I using messages? Because messages is an array, right? So whenever we have an array, we normally use the plural version because this messages is storing multiple messages. This messages array is storing multiple message. That was a bad example, but we use messages here because there are multiple messages in this array. So here we say this is one message and this is another message. So when we refer to the single object, we call it a message. When we refer to the list of the array, we call it messages. And so to see kind of how we break that out, in our for loop, we are referencing the array here. We're referencing multiple messages. And so that's why we use the plural. But when we break it out and look at a single message, we call it message. So what this for loop is doing is it's going over the loop, and each time it goes over the loop of messages, it is pulling out a single message. And so now inside my loop, this message is a single message. And so when I go up and I use message, I am referencing just a single message. And so whenever I am referencing something plural, I tend to be referencing the array itself. When I'm using something in the singular, I am referencing the item inside of the array. So that's why inside here, message, 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 we're referring to that single message object. But whenever I am up here and I have something like messages, I am operating on the array itself, not on an object inside the array. So yes, to answer your question, Susan, whenever we are iterating over messages here, it knows that message is an object because it is pulling out each individual object as part of the for of loop. You could use a for in loop, Shaw. For in is commonly used. Oh, it's been a long time since I've written a for in loop. I believe for ins are used more on objects than they are on arrays. Yeah. So if you wanted to access, this is a good example. If you wanted to access A, B, and C in an object, you could use a for in loop, and property here would be A, B, and C. And then you could use those properties to access the value with syntax like this. I can tell you honestly, I've never written a for in loop in production code. It's one of those things that when you learn about it, it makes a ton of sense. But I can say I can almost exclusively use for of loops whenever I'm iterating over an array. It is very rare for me to use a for let I equal 0 while I is less than whatever. Once in a blue moon, I will write it out, but for of has become my loop of choice for me to whenever I do a loop. But if there's nothing wrong with using a for in loop, we just typically use for in loops over objects more than arrays. And it's more common to loop over an array than it is to loop over an object. Latonia, prompt versus prompt sync. Gonna have to look that one up. Oh, yeah. Okay. So prompt sync is a good question. Prompt sync is a package that you used in Node so that you could go to the terminal prompt and ask, how many times would you like to roll these dice and type in 2 and get that response. Prompt sync is strictly a Node server package. And you use prompt sync to interact with the terminal or the prompt. Sometimes you hear it called a terminal prompt. So prompt sync was used to interact with the terminal. Window.prompt is on the exact opposite side. It is window.prompt is coming from the browser, and you are interacting with the browser window to prompt for something. So two completely different things that solve the same exact goal. I would like to ask a user a question. I would like them to type in a response, and then I would like to take that response and use it somewhere in my code. We used prompt sync over in Node, and we npm installed that package so that Node knew how to interact with the terminal, get the response, and use it in your code. In JavaScript land, we used window.prompt, and we didn't have to install a package for that because it was natively built into the browser. If you tried to use prompt sync in the browser code, it would be like, I have no idea what the hell you were talking about because there is no notion of a terminal prompt in the browser. And if you tried to use window.prompt in Node, it would be like, I have no idea what window you're talking about. I'm a server. All I do is execute JavaScript. So two separate packages, both solving the same problem in two completely different use cases. Yeah, so the extra credit can be summed up in so I just sent a link to the extra credit. What you would be trying to get it to do is after a message shows up, you would want to use that scroll into view to try and get your messages to automatically scroll down to the message that was just added, which will happen to be at the bottom of the screen. And you will probably want to do that in your update HTML method. That would be my suggestion, but totally extra credit. And it's not like we're keeping grades anyway. So it's not like you're going to get an extra point on your weekly score or anything. I'm using that extra credit term figuratively. But if you're up for a challenge, that's probably an extra challenge would be a better word to call that. Give a thumbs up if you're sick of my voice. Totally joking. Oh, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And one final reminder to fill out the feedback form at the end of class. One thing I will throw out here, if you have scheduled a one-on-one meeting with me and would like the meeting recorded, just give me a reminder at the beginning of the meeting to record it, because I will totally forget otherwise. I will try and look at my Calendly and remember if you said yes or no to that. But an extra reminder at the beginning of a meeting, if you would like it recorded, would be appreciated. Stella is convinced that there is something outside, and so that is why you're seeing a lot more of her.
They usually aren't wrong when they see that.
Yeah, in 7 minutes, I'm going to open the door and see where she sprints to. Karen, why don't you share your screen?
Okay, you asked for it. I purposely left it so you could see it. See what it did?
Oh, it's moving on you.
Yeah.
You're missing a closing div tag probably in your JavaScript.
That would, oh, okay. I was wondering about that. I'm like, why the heck is this moving? Stupid. Where did I put that? Because I'm not in the same order that you are, so don't ask me.
Update
here it is.
HTML. Yeah, you're missing a closing div on both HTMLs to update. So you need a closing div on 98 because that div is closing out your col 10, but it isn't closing
right,
out
so
the
I need
div
another-
class row
okay,
message.
so I need another one there.
And then you also need one on 92.
Did I put 2 in there?
VS Code is stupid in their autocomplete.
No, this is, I'm not in VS Code,
Oh, okay.
so that makes it even worse, maybe. No, I know, I want a closing one, not a, there we go. Yeah, I was like, what the heck? Why is it doing that? Because I just was like playing with it, and I'm like, you kind of like are moving on me. What's the deal? And I just kept going, and then I started making them bigger, and I'm like, see, ta-da!
Good to go.
Right now I gotta find my little. Oh, here it's over here. It moved on me. Thank you.
Oh, and if you want extra credit, you can figure out what I'm doing in the print array method and figure out how that is working. That is that is a shorthand that uses both the map function and the join function. And when you get really good at working with arrays and objects and you just want to access that one little piece of information, you can start using shorthand like .map and .join to get all the information out that you need quickly. So that is, print array is something that I would normally write in about 5 lines of code and use a for of loop. And it just lets us access that a lot quicker. So if you are curious on .map and .join, definitely read the documentation. But if you already have a lot going on, you do not need to dig into that.
Can I share my screen for a minute? I have something, I see what I typed wrong when I look at your code because I tried to guess at it myself, but I'm wondering why what I did isn't working.
Sure thing, go for it.
So I put this function, the whole thing inside of the, whatever you call that, the
Template literal.
literal, yeah, exactly. So I'm wondering why that doesn't work because
Yeah,
the
so the backticks work just like quotes do. So you've basically said on click equals and then end my string. And so those backticks shouldn't be there. So if you delete 89,
oh no, you had quotes, regular
Yeah.
quotes. Oh, I was thinking I'm going to use a template literal, so I've got to put the.
No, that whole giant thing is the template literal.
Okay. All right, so I still had a mistake in there. All right.
So that did it. But yeah,
I thought
basically
you only used these template literals with backticks. I didn't.
we
think
do.
you-
So your template literal starts up here and
Oh,
goes
right.
here
Okay.
all the way down to right here.
Okay.
So this whole block is a template literal. And then these quotes are literally getting passed into our HTML. So they actually show up as
HTML
quotes.
quotes. Okay. All right. Thank you. It's just
Yep.
a little confusing for a minute.
Oh, this whole block being a template literal is something that's common to do, but it isn't considered best practice to
Okay.
have that much HTML being generated. And that's when you get into React territory.
Okay.
Of,
cool.
hey, wouldn't it be nice if we could just like update our data and have it just do the right thing in the HTML? The
Yeah.
other kind of inefficient thing that we're doing right now is every time we send a new message, we are generating out the HTML for every single message and updating it.
Right.
And so, hey, wouldn't it be a good idea if like a framework took care of that for us? So when we added a new message, it would just render the new message instead of rendering all the messages out again. Or I should say updating the HTML, because render is a very React-y concept. So those are all things coming down the pipeline.
Cool. Thanks.
So I know you will all be totally and utterly devastated, but our time has come to an end. If you guys do have any questions, I will be around on Slack. So feel free to send them over. This will be a homework assignment due on Sunday at 11:59. If you already have it done, that's awesome. If you have any questions, feel free to ping me. The good news is tomorrow we get out of project land. Well, we'll still be doing a project, but we will be focusing on new concepts in JavaScript. So a couple more advanced things to throw your way. We're going to talk a little bit about requiring code and being able to access JavaScript that's in separate files. We're going to take a moment to talk about an asynchronous code of how can we get multiple code snippets to run at the same time, and how do we pull them all in together. The good news is that this is advanced stuff, and the reason why we're teaching it is so you do have a class to go back to and ask questions. So tomorrow, do not feel super overwhelmed if it's not all clicking. It's things that we would like to expose you to, but it's not things that like you have to get 100% inside and out. And the good news is once you get your core concepts down, kind of everything that gusts through your way in the first 2 weeks and anything that we've covered in the past week and a half, all of these more advanced concepts will start to click. But for tomorrow, we're going to go over some more advanced things and dive into that. And then that will probably also spill into Thursday. In case it doesn't, feel free to include in your daily feedback form or Slack me things that you're like, you feel like you're 90% of the way there on, but you would like a standalone example. And on Thursday, I can on the fly generate some code that will hopefully go over that and explain that out. So we will use Thursday as a catch-up day. One of my favorite instructors in middle school had his like lesson plan laid out on the whiteboard, and then literally had a bottle of ketchup on a string that he'd throw over and go, all right, today is catch-up day. So we will use that probably on Thursday to be a catch-up day if you guys have questions. Obviously, that will be dependent on how tomorrow goes and what we get covered. But feel free to start thinking about questions and what you would like to be covered on Thursday, because Thursday will be your last day of JavaScript in a vacuum. Next module, you get Ryan coming in. Ryan is a awesome, I'm not sure what his title is. He's definitely a senior dev at Density and uses JavaScript all the time. Ryan, I believe, is actually the only instructor that is younger than I am. But Ryan's awesome dev. You will learn a lot from him, and you will start getting into how do I make my JavaScript talk to other JavaScript? How do I get my JavaScript to like go out on the internet and talk to the internet? So really cool stuff that you will get next week. Super excited to see you guys scheduling one-on-ones with me. Reminder that I do not go away. So definitely reach out to Ryan if you have questions for Ryan. But if you would like to continue mentorship, feel free to hit up my Calendly link. So after that, you get Joey. Joey's going to dive into React. And then I can't remember if I come back first or Gus comes back. And we start talking about Node and servers and all kinds of fun stuff there.
I believe it's Gus when I looked. I think Gus comes back for 1 or 2 weeks and then you're there for like another.
We trade back and forth. I can't remember who starts Node and who finishes it. And then we do the same thing on the database of one of us starts it and the other one finishes it. Either way, just Tuesday. So you guys will see me tomorrow for some more advanced JavaScript concepts.